Hello.
Okay, I'm not sure what this series is going to be called or anything. Maybe it's called LearnPython. But basically, I'm
How
going
to do Python with a dummy
for dummies.
for dummies.
Alright, perfect. Although that might be trademarked.
Python for dummies, but YS.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So basically, I know a lot about Python myself.
I don't.
She doesn't know anything. I'm going to try and teach her, and hopefully she brings up questions and concerns that actually anybody trying to learn Python as well will ask. So I'm going to teach her. If she has any questions, she can ask me because I'm right here, and hopefully that can help people learn even better. So we shall begin.
And
A nice little list here of things that we have to go over, and
the upstairs neighbors are
super loud, so any banging. This is the only time that we could record, so that's what I got going for me. Okay, I'm going to begin. In every language, there is something called variables. Variables are how you store information, and that's how we're going to begin. So in Python, it's nice because you don't have to declare what type your variable is going to be. I'll get into that just a little bit later. So just go ahead and type myvar.
capital M or non-capital?
No. So the naming convention in almost every language for variables is something called Camelcase. The very first letter is lowercase, and then if you have two words in that, two or more words in that variable, each new letter.
New word.
In the second, third, fourth word is capitalized. So it's like a camel because it's got the humps. That's why it's called that.
Oh, didn't know that.
So you can just set myvar equal to 10. And there you go. As you can tell, the IDE is happy. You do not have to include a semicolon.
Damn.
Python is really nice. So I think Python does a really good job of striking a balance between being strictly typed, which means that you have to say that that's an integer, which is a type of number, or this is a string, which is like a bunch of characters together. You don't have to say that, but it's better than JavaScript because it does have some rules that places a couple limitations on. The kids outside are screaming too. Everything's just going great right now. Okay, so go down to a new line, and then do myString. And then set that equal to double quotes. And the ID is nice here, it just already puts the cursor in between two double quotes, and you can put anything in the string. Say this is a string. And there you go. A string has been created.
Hello world.
Now, there's two different ways to create a string, so if you want to go down on another line, do myString2.
Two or?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Set that equal, and just do single quotes this time. So in Python, you can create strings as either double quotes or single quotes, which is nice as well, and you can interchange those as much as you want. So I guess I'll get into types now, since we know a little bit about variables. Types are the different types of data that you will have in a variable. So the top number up there is something called an integer. And there's different types of numbers that you can have. If you have a number with a decimal point and then more numbers after that, that's called a float or a double. Python is one of those languages that does not make a distinction between the two, so I just call it a double. So a number with decimal point is a double.
Okay.
A number with no decimal point is just an int.
Oh.
And then for strings, you can have double quotes or single quotes. And a string is just a string. Even if you have one character in the string, that's still a string. There's no such thing in Python as a char. Most other languages have a distinction between a char, which is a single character, which is typically in a single string or single dashes, and then strings and double quotes. But Python makes no distinction. Everything is a string if it's in those single or double quotes. So you can just say, this is still a string. And as for types, there's not much else besides that. That's pretty much all you'll be assigning variables to. Now there is something more complicated called classes and stuff, and Definitely not something for an introduction to talk about, but you can assign those to variables later on too, and it's pretty cool. That's what expands programming languages to do a lot. So, okay, so we hit the vars, hit the types. Let's go to math operators. So why don't you declare another variable that's a number? So you can say num1. Num, and then the number 1. Yeah. Also in variable names you can have a number after the word. You cannot begin a variable with a number. And you can assign that 5. You can just say for now. Do num2 and put that equal to 2.
2?
Yeah. Okay. So now that we got that, why don't you go down a couple of lines. With the numbers that you declare, you can use those variable names to do mathematical operations. So we're going to do a couple of things here. Start typing print, and then you can hit tab, and then it just nicely puts you in between this function. Not going to worry about what functions are right now, just need to know that this print function will print this, whatever we put in there, to the console. So functions are a whole thing in and of themselves, but don't need to worry about that right now. And what PyCharm is telling us to do. But anyways, so now you can put, why don't you do num1 plus num2. So this is how you can see that like variables are pretty good because they allow you to assign a name to a number or something instead of having to use just those numbers. So that way if you use like num1 for something else later on in the program, all you have to do is change num1. You don't have to change all of the hard-coded values that are like 5. So it helps it. So I think you might be able to try pressing Control-D. Yes, okay. So in PyCharm you can press Control-D and it will copy the line, which is very helpful. Do that 2 more times so that way we have a total of 4. Okay, so go back up to that second line and instead of adding them, do subtraction. And then go down and do division, which is a slash. And then multiplication is times. Asterisk.
Which is the 8.
Asterisk, yeah.
It's above the 8.
Do Control-D 1 more time. Now, you can be anywhere in the line, just so you know. And with this one, do the percentage sign.
Oh, I learned this.
Yes. So the top 4 operators are pretty easy, basic math, basically. But the Modulo Operator, which is that percentage sign on the last line, is something unique. So it's basically going to divide the number, and it's going to go divide it as many times as it can. So with 5, dividing into 2 goes into 2, so you have 3 left over, 2 again, you have 1 left over, and with that 1 remainder, that is what it returns. It returns the remainder of what wasn't able to be divided. So that's the Modulo Operator. It's pretty useful. You can actually use it a lot. It's one of the most popular uses, I'd say, for it is to determine whether a number is even or odd, because if you do a variable modulus 2, you know that if that equals 0, that number is even. So we're going to actually run the program for the first time. So if you go up to the top right or left and see run, and then click run, click vars. I don't know why it does that, but there's a lot of stuff going on. If your program doesn't work, don't freak out. It's going to give you a lot of error messages if it doesn't work. I might make a separate video on how to get this installed, but yeah. So let's just walk through the values. So that second line right there, the first line is just telling you where it was actually executing the file from, but that second line is 7, which is 5 plus 2, so that makes sense, and then 3 is 5 minus 2, and then the division returns a double or a float, just depends on how you want to call it, float and double or same thing, but it has a decimal point, so it is one of those two at least.
Why do you need to, why do you need to name, like, decimals? Like, why does it have to have a name, like float?
It's a different type in most in every language, even Python.
Like, why does the decimal point matter rather than a whole number?
They're like different numbers. So a number that doesn't have a floating point, doesn't have a decimal point, is different than one that does. And I
So
can't.
3.0 is different than 3?
Yes, because
Okay.
it may not matter in Python, but in some languages, it actually does matter in Python because when you try to divide like a float or an int by a double, so a number without a decimal point with a number with a decimal point, you can run into problems where that that number won't have a decimal point even though it should because it's an int. So that's why you need to specify and know which one's which. Yeah, so you can see at the bottom, second to last line is a 10, which makes sense, 5 times 2, and then the 1 is returned, which is the remainder of 5 divided by 2. And that is that. So that's math operators for the most part.